And so the title of our talk tonight was Simple Tips for Healthy Eating and Weight Loss. And the things we're going to talk about are not specific for weight loss. We're not going to talk about a diet, but we're going to talk about principles of healthy living that you can employ in your life. And if weight loss is one of your goals, then hopefully you'll understand the things we're going to talk about, and you can use that to lose weight if that's your goal, or they're just things you need to know about eating healthy in the first place. And so if weight loss is your goal, I first want you to realize that being overweight or having extra fat is not the problem. That is the symptom. It is just the symptom. The problem is either eating too much or eating the wrong things. And we're going to talk about those things in just a minute. And eating too much can include by amount or by frequency. I mentioned about diets, so we're not going to talk about diets. The studies show that for the vast majority of people that do a diet, that when they go off of it, within 1 to 5 years, they put all the weight back on. And so diets do not work, but lifestyle changes do. And so hopefully you'll learn a thing or two that you'll want to implement into part of a healthy lifestyle that, again, can help you manage weight if that's your goal, or just be healthier in general. And so as far as eating too much is concerned, let me give you an analogy. So when we eat food, we either use that food as energy or we store it as future energy. So if we don't burn it right then for energy, then we're going to store it. So just like this battery here stores energy, if you're eating extra food, eating more than you need, you're going to store it as energy. And so picture that fat that you might have on you as just like this battery. It's an energy store. And so the only way you're going to get that energy store to go away is to actually use the energy in it. And so eating too much could mean that you need to eat less calories to use up this energy store, or better yet, stop eating, or don't eat so often. When we stop eating, we stop storing up energy, and we finally take the energy we have stored and we use it for energy. So that's how you burn fat. That's how you burn calories. And so you can do that by doing something called intermittent fasting, which our talk that we're going to have in 3 weeks, it's on October 6th. We're going to talk about that in more detail. But intermittent fasting just means that you're limiting the window by which you're consuming calories. And so, for example, if you ate within a 6-hour window, that would mean for the other 18 hours of the day, your body has to use your energy stores in order to have energy. And so you start burning fat. Or if you go fasting for, let's say, 24 hours, at least once a month, then once a month you're training your body to use up your energy stores. Now, the vast majority of people in America do not have a problem with not having enough food. They have a problem with having too much food. The vast majority of people in America never go hungry. And so one of the first tools I want you to understand is that when you feel hungry, that does not mean you need to eat. That means your stomach is empty. And we're going to talk about this more later, that your stomach has a volume sensor in it. And so when your stomach is empty, you get a signal telling you to eat, which is not the same thing as saying you need energy. It's telling you to eat because it's empty, not because you need energy. So hopefully that makes sense. So if you can ignore what your stomach is telling you and realize it doesn't mean I need to eat, it just means that it's empty, then you can start to use your energy instead of piling on battery after battery to store for some point in the future where you're never ever going to use it. At least most people. Most people in our country never go hungry. And so with intermittent fasting, I would recommend that just as part of a healthy lifestyle, that every single person should go at least 12 hours every day without eating. So that means if you eat dinner and you finish eating by 7 p.m., you shouldn't eat until 7 a.m. the next day. And this is just good for general health. This is not necessarily, again, for weight loss. Everybody should be doing this. And so it takes at least 8 to 12 hours of not eating most of the time for you to start using up your energy stores. Now, if it's during the day, and let's say you've not eaten breakfast and you're doing some sort of physical activity, you're going to start using those energy stores sooner. Well, I guess it's breakfast, then you would have been fasting the night before. But let's say you skip lunch and you go for multiple hours before you eat dinner, and you're actually doing things that consume more energy, like exercise or just walking or whatever. Again, you're going to dip into your energy source and start to use these up faster. than during the night. But in general, when we're talking about at night, and between meals, you need at least 8 to 12 hours before you're ever going to start burning up these energy things that you've been storing forever. There are more benefits to intermittent fasting than just simply burning calories or losing weight. Once you get to around between 14 and 18 hours, your body actually starts healing in ways it doesn't when you're constantly eating. So if we're constantly feeding ourselves, that requires a lot of energy to store up that food or do whatever it is our body needs to process all the carbohydrates and fats and protein. And so when we finally stop eating, our body can finally start to heal and repair things it never gets a chance to. And think of your car. If you're going to fix it, you got to stop driving it first. Same thing. There's lots of wonderful benefits to fasting. Just by simply not eating, our body finally has energy to heal and repair things. And again, our talk in October, we're going to talk about that in more detail. Again, one of the things we'll talk about in more detail when we discuss intermittent fasting later is something called metabolic switching. And what that is either your body is either running on carbohydrates or it's running on fats as its primary fuel source. And so intermittent fasting does what's called metabolic switching, which stops your body from just being dependent on carbohydrates, which you get from eating, and actually burning up your energy that you've been storing in the form of fat. And so again, you've got to go at least 8 to 12 hours before you start to burn fat. And so on that note, let me grab this whiteboard. So hopefully the people on Facebook can see this. I'm going to try and get rid of that glare there. So you can see this top right here that I've got going here, or there's a wave that goes up and down. And so one of the things you've got to understand is that a calorie is not just a calorie. And what I mean by that is a gram of carbohydrates has 4 calories, a gram of protein has 4 calories, and a gram of fat has 9 calories. And in the past, dietitians in particular would not really worry about what you're eating. They'd just say count your calories. And if you want to lose weight, eat less calories. Now that's true in principle. However, as I said, a calorie is not a calorie. In other words, a calorie of carbohydrates also sends a signal to your body that's different than a calorie from protein. And so calories also contain hormonal messengers with them that tell your body to do different things. And so this one here is representing what our blood sugar looks like. And hopefully you can see it, but there's a wave that goes up and down. There's a green line in the middle. The green line in the middle is supposed to represent having stable blood sugar. So when we eat carbohydrates, those carbohydrates get broken down into sugar. And I want you to understand that's all carbohydrates except for fiber. And so even if you're eating things you might think is healthy, whole grains, 15 minutes in your stomach is a pile of sugar. And so that's whole wheat, oats, whole brown rice, those kinds of things. Turns into sugar. So when we eat carbohydrates, it gets turned into sugar, and our blood sugar rises above the threshold, and then our body releases insulin up here, and then insulin tells our cells to take those carbohydrates and put them into your cells. Now, if you're exercising, this is a great thing. And so if you're exercising, you put those carbohydrates into your muscles so you can keep exercising. If you're not exercising when you're eating carbohydrates, then your body says take that sugar and store it up as fat. Again, unless you've just finished exercising. If you're finished exercising, then you replenish these, it's called glycogen, it's the storage form of carbohydrates in the muscle in your liver. But again, if you're not exercising or doing it around exercise, you're going to store any excess calories that you don't need for energy right that second as fat, so that your body can use it later, which most people never use it later. But at any rate, when our blood sugar goes down and then we get below that threshold where our blood sugar gets too low, and we get to the bottom of this trough, then that's going to stimulate the desire to eat. And then our blood sugar is going to go up, and then we release insulin. Insulin tells us to take the sugar, put it into our cells as fat, and then blood sugar goes down again, which at the bottom of that trough, it's going to stimulate you to eat again. And so if you understand this, one of the first things you can do is just stop eating so many carbohydrates. And so I'll use myself as an example. I've never been overweight, but growing up, I just didn't eat anything hardly that wasn't carbohydrates. So I'd wake up and have a bowl of oatmeal with sugar in it for breakfast. And then by 10 o'clock, I'd be starving, so I'd have to have a banana or something else with sugar in it. And then by noon, I'd be starving, so then I'd have lunch and have, I don't know, a bologna sandwich or potato chips. And then a few hours later, when I got home from school, I'd be starving, so I'd have to have another snack again of maybe if I was doing good, a banana or an apple, but probably some potato chips or microwave popcorn when I was growing up. And then a few hours later, I'd be starving, so we'd have dinner. And I'm not kidding, I would have a meal at 10 o'clock at night because I would be starving because I was doing this all the time. I couldn't go more than a few hours without eating, or else I was just starving because my body was completely just burning off of carbohydrates, and I wasn't eating enough protein or fat to stay full for a very long time. And so if you understand this cycle here, hopefully you can realize that you need to start eating less carbohydrates, more good fats and protein, so you're not doing this all the time. Because again, when you get to the bottom of this trough, you're going to feel hungry and you're going to eat more, and you're probably going to carve more carbohydrates actually to fill that need. And you've probably all experienced that if you're really hungry. I know for myself, making home from work, if I'm really hungry, I don't make as good choices as when I eat when I'm not super hungry, and I tend to want to just munch and chew on carbohydrates. One other thing too, carbohydrates digest faster than proteins and fats, much faster. In fact, within about 15 minutes, whereas protein and fats can take between an hour and 2 hours to digest, which is why if you're just eating carbohydrates, again, you're going to want to eat more frequently. And again, any carbohydrate that you don't burn up right then, you're going to store as fat, theoretically for energy that you would use later. So let me mention quickly that protein stimulates your body to build and to grow. One neat thing about protein is that 30% of the calories you consume from protein, your body uses just to process that protein. And so we talked about calorie not being a calorie. So again, 30% of all the protein you're going to eat, you just burn it up, consuming all that protein, or processing it is a better word. And so studies show that whether you're doing a low-fat or low-carbohydrate diet, as long as you double your protein, you lose weight. And so that's one little tool. All right, so we'll forget about the whiteboard for now. And let's see. Oh, one other thing about carbohydrates I wanted to mention is that when our blood sugar gets really high and stays really high, that's when you develop type 2 diabetes. And if you've ever had a blood test where they look at your blood sugar, there's something else that's even more important called hemoglobin A1C, sometimes just called A1C for short. What that is that's a measure of how much sugar is stuck on your red blood cells. And the higher that number is, the worse it is. And so if you've had that checked, you want to get your A1C lower. And several bad things happen. When your blood sugar, or excuse me, when your red blood cells get coated with sugar, they can't get into tiny little places, like your capillaries in your feet, which is why diabetics develop neuropathy. Because if you can't get blood flow to your feet, it affects the nerves, and then you get pain and neuropathy and tingling and needles and all that kind of stuff in your feet. Also, when we have too much blood sugar, tissues will get, it's called glycation. Basically, sugar gets stuck on things that it shouldn't get stuck on. For example, the lenses in your eyes. And so one of the two causes of cataracts is too high blood sugar. Literally, the lens of your eye gets coated with sugar, or the cells do anyways, and then they become harder. Picture toast. When you take bread and put it in your toaster, it becomes hard, and it's almost even a little sticky. That's what happens inside your body with too much sugar. And this process called glycation does all sorts of bad things to the tissues. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to talk about artificial sweeteners. So when we eat sugar, we talked about how our blood sugar goes down and stimulates us to want to eat more sugar. Artificial sweeteners do the same thing. Even though they don't impact your blood sugar, they will stimulate you to want to eat more sugar, which is why it's a good reason to not drink diet sodas or rely heavily on diet foods that are low in sugar that have a bunch of artificial sweeteners in them. Your body is designed to seek food. Obviously, we all want to survive. And for most of human history, people didn't have enough food. So if you found something really sweet, your body was stimulated to want to eat more and more of it. And so when we eat processed foods, they have hidden sugars in them. And what I mean by hidden sugars is there's sugar in that food, but you don't necessarily taste it. Like in cracker, for example, you may not think it's being sweet, but if it has sugar in it, it will still stimulate you to want to eat more. So they've done interesting studies with people where they numb their tongue and then have them eat sugar, but they can't taste it, and there are nerve receptors in their stomach that sense that sugar and stimulate them to want to eat more. One of the things we'll talk about in more detail is avoiding processed foods, but to avoid artificial sweeteners and hidden sugars is one of the reasons you want to avoid processed foods. So a couple tips on carbohydrates, when to eat them. By the way, when your blood sugar goes down, it makes you tired. And so if you really want to be tired first thing in the morning, eat a bunch of sugar, and 2 hours later, you'll want to go back to sleep. And so I'd recommend eating protein and good fats in the morning and not a lot of carbohydrates. Now on the positive side, if you want to go to bed at night, that's a good time to eat carbohydrates. Carbohydrates and then a fat called tryptophan that's found in turkey. Your body uses those things to make serotonin and melatonin. Those things help you feel good, which is part of the reason why you want to eat carbs, but they also make you tired. And so if you are going to eat some carbs, hopefully some whole grains, eat those at night, and it will help you sleep better because it's going to help your body produce serotonin and melatonin. And by the way, I'm not saying to never eat carbs, but again, it's better to eat them at night than first thing in the morning. You'll find you have more energy during the day if you do that. Also, timing during meals is important. If you eat carbs first, then your body's going to release insulin, like we talked about here, to lower your blood sugar. And so you can curb that if you'll just simply eat the other things first. If you have protein or fat or fiber and eat those things first, then it doesn't cause your blood sugar to rise quite as high as if you eat the carbohydrates first. So I mentioned one of our tools, that understanding that your stomach has a volume sensor, not a calorie sensor. And when you feel hungry, that does not mean you need to eat. If you have fat on you, you don't need to eat. You have plenty of energy. Your stomach is just empty. And so our stomach has a volume sensor. For example, you could either eat 5 apples or a package of M&Ms and get the exact same amount of calories. But if you eat the 5 apples, you're going to feel fuller, longer, more satiated, and you're probably not going to eat as much. If you eat the package of M&Ms, it will probably stimulate you to eat another package of M&Ms. And so you can leverage that to eat fiber with all of your meals. And so fruits and vegetables, yes, they contain sugar, but they also contain a lot of fiber, and they also contain a lot of water. And those things help balance out the sugar that's in them, so you're not going to crave eating carbs like if you're just eating potato chips or candy bars or candy or something like that. The second tool that I want you to understand is that when if we're up too late at night, it will stimulate a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin stimulates us to want to eat. And so one simple thing you can do is just simply go to bed. And one thing I'd recommend everybody do is that once it gets about 8:30 at night, start turning down the lights in your house to prepare your body to go to sleep. And ideally, you would not have any light in your eyes from 11 p.m. till 4 p.m. Doing that disrupts your hormones and will cause you to want to eat more. It also affects dopamine, which will affect your motivation for the next day. So one of the best things you do is just not overeat, is simply to go to sleep. Many times when we overeat, it's because we're tired, and you'll crave sugar for the energy too, by the way. All right, third tool I want you to understand is to know what your stomach is looking for. And it is true that your stomach wants sugar and it wants fat. Again, we have receptors that are built around getting high-calorie things based on survival, because as I've said, for most of human history, human beings did not have enough food to eat. And when they found something good, it stimulated them to eat more. But your body also has receptors for amino acids. Those are the building blocks of protein. And your body also has receptors for essential fatty acids. So these are the good fats, things like in fish. And so we will eat typically until one of two things happens. One, either our stomach is full and we feel the volume sensor and we can't eat anymore, or we eat the right kinds of foods and our stomach senses it has what it needs to work properly, and then we stop eating. So for